Our next speaker is Michael Waterston. Michael is, again, an entrepreneur who is now collaborating and assisting another sister NCE entity called Simtech, which is based in London, Ontario, and is focused on imaging technology, and one that CSII works very closely in our robotic development, and we have a number of joint projects. Michael, again, comes from a business background. He has fostered a number of projects, business projects in the field, from neuroscience commercialization at Rotman Research Institute before taking his role at Simtech, and he is fostering a new medical imaging project to prepare clients for market launch. He's going to talk about crossing the valley of death. Now, as I said earlier, there is that valley between research and commercialization space, and then there is that valley between commercialization and actually sustain income and being able to sell your product. And I'm sure he's going to talk about all of those different valleys. Michael, it's great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so I am Michael Waterston. I'm the Director of Business Development with the Center for Imaging Technology Commercialization. And we work with early stage companies that have medical imaging discoveries and help them build clinical prototypes, get clinical testing data, and move them along this process towards eventual commercial application and sales in the marketplace in a very heavily regulated marketplace. And whenever you're talking about innovation in Canada, this concept of the dreaded valley of death will come up pretty regularly. It's a very popular metaphor. And so I thought it'd be good to talk today about some of the experiences that we've had helping clients get over the valley of death, or Death Valley in particular. So this is often the way that you'll see it portrayed. And I think there's a few things that jump out in this model that are worth calling attention to. First of all, on one side, you have this relatively lush area of active, basic research that looks all pretty straightforward and simple. On the other side, you have commercial product development with lots of big companies making big money, and this kind of easy process of getting commercial product out to the market. And in between, you have this valley that needs a bridge to get over it. And unfortunately, all three of those things are pretty wrong. Basic research is a real challenge. Making forward progress in discovery is something that requires incredible expertise and great risk. And on the commercial side of things, where I've had more of my own experience, it is also very challenging to be able to bid out successfully innovative commercial products in any kind of a regular manner over any period of time. And in between, when you're thinking about the progress of ideas into commercial applications, even Death Valley itself is not a valley, it's a desert. It's a very large area, and you're not going to build a bridge across it. There's not going to be one solution to get things from point A to point B. And so if you're facing this desert that you're trying to cross, I mean, it's a very daunting task, and you don't want to approach a task like this unprepared. A lot of people looking at this feel a little bit like these guys. And you don't have much confidence that they're going to make it to the other side. But not everyone is like that. And, it is possible to be like this guy. Right? You can be experienced, you can be prepared. People do cross this all the time. And so it's important to take a look out there for people that are successful in these difficult tasks and try to figure out how you can be more resilient and more prepared for this thing that is a possible thing to achieve. So I'm going to talk about 3 tools in the Death Valley Survival Kit. They're not my ideas, so I'll try to give credit where credit's due, but don't blame any of it entirely on me. First of all, you need to know where you're going. You need to have a very clear picture of what your destination is going to look like. Secondly, you need to know where the oases are. You're going through some very hazardous terrain. There's some safe places along the way that you need to take advantage of. Know what the terrain looks like. And finally, have a map. You have to have a reference in terms of where you're going and where you are on your journey. So start off. we're going to look to see what the destination looks like. And I'm going to abuse this metaphor too, so I'm sorry. Sometimes it gets to be a bit of a stretch. But so you take out your telescope and you're looking to where you're going to go, but in this case, you're not looking across distance, you're looking across time. So in the future, when you are commercially successful and you're delighting your customers with what you're selling to them, take a good look at what the rest of that picture looks like. Flesh it out. And in particular, there's 3 things you want to be able to get a very good sense of. Who is your customer in the end? What is their problem? And how are you solving it for them? So this comes from this process of customer development, articulated by Steve Blank and many others. And there are actually a fair number of resources out there to help you do this customer development process. Often, when we have clients that come with very exciting discoveries, they will have very strong ideas of what the solution is, relatively good understanding of what the problem is, and a very poor idea of who's actually going to buy it. And in healthcare, that's a very complicated discussion to have. Often the user, well, the ultimate benefit goes to the patient, and they really have no say in terms of what's available to be used with them. The user is a clinician, and they're often not buying the solution, and the buyer has the whole other set of criteria that they're going through. And then it can be very different from one region to another. So you've got a very tricky thing to figure out here. Where am I going? But other people have done it. First of all, you've got to realize that you're not going to be able to solve this problem yourself. You have to get out of the building. You're going to have to talk to other people about what their problems are and how your solution fits. And you're going to make mistakes along the way. This is an iterative process. So you're going to guess, test, and then repeat and do it all over again. You have to make a guess, though. You really do have to lay out what you think who you think your customer is, what you think their problem is, and how you think you're going to solve that, to give something for people to react to. If you just leave it blue sky, how would you use this technology? You're not going to get the information you're looking for. But if you say something that's wrong, people pick up on that pretty quickly. So if you put your assumption out there, you can get feedback on where you've really made mistakes and get it early. People are generally experts in the field, are generally pretty flattered to be involved in early product design. You have to be respectful of their time, but you can get access to them, especially if you're coming from a research environment where you're already an expert in the field, and you probably know who these people are in the space, in the commercial side, and you can get access to them, respectfully. And they can appreciate also that it's an iterative process. So as you make your mistakes, you can incorporate those in your next assumption and take it into your next discussion with your next key opinion leader, and eventually circle back. So in your subsequent discussions, you've taken into account their feedback, you've adjusted their plan. This is now partially their plan. They're getting more bought into what you're doing, and this makes them a much more fertile ground for being a potential pilot site or future commercial collaborator. And you can start delving deeper. So you start asking about these questions of, who else would do something like this? What's the alternative to doing this? How much would you pay for that? How much would you pay for what we're proposing? How would you decide to buy what we're proposing? Really get all of the how answers fleshed out as much as possible. Guess, test, repeat. So if that's getting a very clear picture of where you're going, and honestly, you can do it very early on, and you can do it very cheaply. We're just talking about time on the phone, maybe WebEx. This is something that you really should be doing as soon as possible. The next thing to get a sense of is, where are the oases? Where can you get some respite as you're going on this journey? And there are lots of service organizations, the RICs that we've heard from already, people here that are there to help you. Really, though, your critical water that you're going to be looking for is funding. And it's something that everyone that we talk to talks about, and it's one of the things that we hope that we can help provide some guidance on the landscape. So I swear we didn't coordinate the technology readiness levels reference, but so this is reinforcing this is actually a useful tool to get a sense of where you're at in the process. It was developed by NASA to help them make sense of all of these great discoveries and where they were in the process of getting into space. And we've taken a variation of it for medical devices here. But the key point here is that as you move from discovery through component development, through system development, through taking that system and putting it into the environment that it's going to be used eventually, in our case it's the clinic, through validation testing in that same area, out to regulatory approval, getting it onto the market, and then monitoring it as it's out in the, doing its job in the place where it's supposed to be, the places of respite will differ as you move through this process. And people get very comfortable on both sides of these relationships in one of these columns, and it can be very difficult to move from one to the other. So in basic research, you really do have to understand who's funding basic research, and you get very good at knowing the challenges there and getting access to that type of money. As you go further to the industrial side, there is industrial R&D funding in Canada, and companies that do R&D know very much kind of who they are and how to get access to them. And in between, it gets a bit trickier. There are proof of principle grants that do get their, I guess, deal flow through collaborations between industry and academic research. And then the private investors are really the key glue that you have to keep in mind all the time. So first, to talk about the alphabet soup. For many of you in the audience, you may be, you're probably, actually, frankly, you're probably either funded by or have a very deep relationship with at least one, two, or more than one of these agencies. And I don't want to go through and describe what all of them stand for, but it is important that you understand that that there are multiple sources of support for different stages of funding. And on the industrial side, for those of you that are maybe just starting to think about what happens on that side of the fence, very important to understand that Industrial Research Assistance Program, IRAP, is the the main Canadian project-based funding for innovation research. And then at the bottom, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credit is something that you will figure out if you're starting a small innovative company, but it's nice to know about it ahead of time. And this is a generous tax credit for funds that are being spent on private research in companies. And it's where most of the money is spent in Canada in terms of R&D support in the private sector. And it's money it's cash that, even though it's a tax credit, one of the things that people often don't understand is that it is cash that is paid out even if you're not profitable yet. So even if you're not paying taxes yet, you can get funding for this, but it's after the fact, after you've already spent on your R&D. And I would be remiss to stand up in an audience like this and not talk about the elephant in the room, which is an acronym that we can't access. So around the same time that the Canadarm was first flying, the SBIR program was approved by Congress in the United States. And it stands for Small Business Innovative Research. It has over 30 years track record now. And because it's this relationship between research and industry, it was set up to needed to be renewed. And so now it's been renewed by multiple Republican and Democratic Congresses. It's a very politically popular program. And what it would look like in Canada is that there's the basic research funding agencies will be required to allocate, in this case, in their case, it's 3% of their funding dollars to be, research dollars to be spent in research at a small business. And that kind of an allocation of money is not really comfortable for the granting councils who are used to giving money to nonprofits, academics. And so in the US, it's administered by the Small Business Administration. Probably the closest thing here would be Industry Canada, who are used to getting jobs done in industry and can manage the logistics of dealing with companies. So the reality is now in the US, they've had 30 years of billions of dollars being invested in the strength of their innovative small companies doing research. And thousands of companies have benefited from this kind of things. And there are household names that you'd all recognize as innovative companies that had, at their very riskiest moments, had real respite available from a program like this. So that's my pitch for something that I think it's missing in the ecosystem here. That's a very tangible example. Talk about getting out of the building and looking at what else is going on. This is probably one of the most researched programs there are out there. And I'm very interested in helping advance Canada towards something like this. I'm very open to working with anyone that would like to talk to me later about baby steps you can make in this direction. Investors, though. So this is the constituency that you want to really make sure that you understand very well. It invariably starts with yourself as an entrepreneur. You need to be clear about what your limitations are in terms of being able to fund your own work, but it's almost impossible to get out of the gate without some of your own money being involved. Beyond that, you start talking about friends and family, and these are people that are investing in the project because they're investing in you. They know that you're not going to be taking advantage of them. They know they're taking a technical risk, but this is also critical for small companies getting off the ground. And you look at ones that have legs, it's because they do have support from their friends and family network in the very early, riskiest stages. Beyond that, you can start to get into some professionals, and Canada's gotten much better about structuring its angel groups. It's actually relatively straightforward at this point to get in front of a large number of angel investors, but I think our experience is that it's very important to try to focus on angels that are knowledgeable about the industry that you're dealing in. You can have a lot of conversations, and it can be quite time-consuming to deal with, really low probability investors. But if you have somebody that is comfortable with the space, you get a quicker conversation, and you get the benefit that you'll likely get a higher valuation on your project because they can see value when they see it. And so they won't be discounting the risk quite as much as someone who's completely unfamiliar with the space. And same thing goes for venture capitalists. Do pay attention to who, both domestically and especially internationally, who's investing in similar spaces, will be familiar with the kind of problems that you're going after, and be attuned to presenting your opportunity in a way that it fits with their business model. Okay, so if that's the know where you're going, know where the oases are, the last piece is that you need to have a map. You need to have written down, so you can look at it, what your plan is from getting from A to B. And if you're thinking about a business, you've probably been told at some point or asked for your business plan. And I'm here to reiterate that this is a real question, and it's a real thing to do, and it's awkward. We get asked all the time to write business plans for other people, but this is your plan. And if you're going to have a plan, you need to write down your plan. And I'm here to demystify the business plan and encourage. I know for a fact that all of you can write a business plan. This can be done. And all of those business plans could be improved by feedback by somebody else. So get started if you have an idea. So I'll go through the 5 key components you want to have covered and start getting feedback from other people about where they're weak and where they're strong. Tell your story. Give a little bit of a history of how you got to where you are, who the management is. Do talk about your IP position up front. That's where the core of the value is likely to be in almost all of these projects. And set the stage for what's to come. Okay, company overview. This one's pretty straightforward. Now we get into something that's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to talk about how big is your addressable market. And especially if you haven't sold anything yet, this just feels like pure guesswork. But honestly, this is a key component for an investor figuring out where you fit in terms of their decision making, and you have to make an honest effort to get this right. Now, luckily, you have regional innovation centers in Ontario that have access to market analysis professionally done through references to Mars, and you should take advantage of that. It's a great resource that gets you started. Now, you need to bridge the gap between the publicly available market data and your specific niche. And you need to do that in a way that's defensible, that you're comfortable with, and you need to express it in a way that what would happen if you owned the market that you're going after. Don't just take the big number that you get from the public market and say, we're only going to get 1% of this, and that's so much money. You need to be making a picture that you're going to win in where you're playing. And so you need to show how big that pool is that you're going after that you could get if you win. And that involves assumptions about how much will be paid. It'll involve assumptions about how the market will change with your technology. And so another very good source for this information is the publicly available annual reports of companies that are in your space. The amount of information that's disclosed there can be very, very helpful, especially when they talk about what their future plans are and show where they're recognizing their revenue. Okay, so you do some market analysis, and then talk about your product plan. So through this whole process, you have been building your knowledge about the business that you're in. You are becoming the expert in your business, and that's going to be critical for you to communicate to others. And the product plan is where you get to express that expertise, right? Talk about your customer product fit. Talk about the evidence you have that that's fitting. Talk about the receptiveness to early sales. Because ultimately, the investment decisions will often be about how believable is it that you're actually going to get this money from this person. You're convincing me they're going to pay, the more evidence you have to support that, the better. Early sales or, revenue generating partnerships are fantastically helpful here. You also need to talk about how you're going to actually sell that to them. And again, this is going to get a little bit uncomfortable, but you're going to have to talk about how many salespeople you think it's going to take in order to close how many deals and how you're going to support your product in the field. These are real considerations for them actually getting their money out in the end, and you need to put some thought into what the story is going to be there. Okay, number 4, now you talk about the technology. So you've just spent all this time talking about stuff that's a little bit uncomfortable and not where you've been spending all your time before you get to the part where you actually, are very excited about. That excitement will come across. You don't need to worry about that. You want to present some data about the effectiveness of the technology, that it can do what you say it can do. And there'll be plenty of time to talk about this later offline. Don't fill up your business plan with too much technology. And then finances. Again, a little bit outside the comfort zone, but I know that all of you can work Excel well enough to be able to put together a financial plan. And again, it's what the audience needs to see. What do you think your finances are going to look like once they've given you the money? You've got to look forward and you've got to paint it out. And the other funny thing about this is that it has to look a little bit different depending on which money you're asking for. So you've got to build into your plan, you've successfully received what you've asked for, and that's going to look different depending on who you are. So you have to go back and rework your finances, your projections a bit for the audience. But having basic financial modeling is something that there's lots of examples of online. This learning process about becoming the expert does involve you learning about how to present these things in a way that looks normal, right? Looks like the way everybody else presents their finances. And then the final kind of part of the plan to write down is, you do need to put together a pitch deck. Try to restrict the number of slides. You want something short, 10 slides if you can. And this is going to be what you stimulate the conversation around. So covering the same topics, cover it in as visual a way as possible, and convey that information, because this is the way you're really going to be engaging with people, is around the pitch deck. And then also a non-confidential one-pager is something to think about early on. Just like when you're out talking to your key opinion leaders about who else maybe I should talk to, you should be talking the same thing when you're talking about money. Who else might be interested in this project? And you need to be able to give them some tools to introduce you to people. So they need to have a non-confidential tool to be able to introduce the project to their friends. So this was what I was hoping to talk about today. If you're looking to cross Death Valley, a few of the tools that it's good to have in hand are to know where you're going, to know where your help is to get you there, and to make sure you have your plan written down. Now, you're not the first person to look across this. If you're successful, hopefully you're going to go back and do it again. This is a skill that you want to be building up over time, so that the next time that you're facing Death Valley, maybe it's more like, a walk in the park. So that's my thing. Thank you.